Hello everyone and welcome! In today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a new, low-cost and easy-to-assemble 1/24 scale RC chassis kit. I'll be showcasing the entire assembly process, connecting all of the electronics, and mounting this sweet-looking C3 Corvette body. I'll also demonstrate the kind of performance that you can expect from this chassis with a quick test drive. This kit features our popular FP UC1 chassis design that I have used for many projects prior. While this chassis doesn't feature the lifelike details seen on many of our other chassis and components, the FP UC1's brutally simplistic design is quite durable, easy to assemble, and affordable. Like with many of the other chassis that I've built on this channel, it's geared more towards the scale modeler who wants to make their lifelike creations move, more so than the RC enthusiast who wants an all-out basher or competitive race car, so keep this fact in mind when choosing a platform for your next RC project. With that said though, there's certainly enough power to make this thing slide around. This chassis' simple design and adjustable wheelbase makes it ideal for the custom builder, and for $65 US, you're getting almost every component that you'll need to complete your RC build. You can even easily 3D print all of these chassis pieces yourself at home if you'd like, with the non-3D printable components available for sale in a standalone kit. Of course, all of the links to both this chassis kit and the STL files will be below in the description if you'd like to do a build like this yourself. This particular variant that I'm building today is designed to be perfectly matched to the AMT 68 Corvette Custom Plastic Model Kit, though the wheelbase can be adjusted up to 112mm, which will allow it to fit other similar lightweight plastic bodies as well. Metal die-cast bodies, however, should not be used as it's just too much weight for this chassis. Other variants sized to fit other popular model kits will be added in the future. What model kit do you think we should make a chassis for next? Let us know in the comments. For now though, here's a look at all of the components that are included with this new kit. As you'll see, the assembly process is quite simple. Start by getting the threaded axle shaft, gear, bearings, and nylon nuts. The metal nuts look very similar to the nylon ones, but they don't get used until later to hold the wheels on. If there's any doubt about which is which, just use a magnet. If it sticks, it's metal. We'll also be labeling the bags on the kit that you'll receive. You'll only need 2 bearings and 1 nylon nut for this step. Thread the gear onto the axle as shown. Note that one side of the gear is flat while the other has a lip. The side with the lip will be pressed up against the bearing. Speaking of bearings, place one on each side of the chassis as shown. Next, slide the axle in and then thread the nylon nut on the other side of the threaded axle. Adjust the axle's position as necessary so that it is centered. Be sure not to over-tighten the nylon nut as it could prevent the axle from spinning freely. The distance from the outermost edge of the threaded axle to the chassis should be the same on each side. A digital caliper makes this really easy, as you can see here. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, but center it the best you can. Then apply some glue to hold both the gear and the nylon nut in place. It's important that both the gear and the nylon nut are solidly attached to the threaded axle and not able to spin freely. Of course, also make sure that you don't accidentally get glue into the bearings. Here's what you should have so far. We'll move on to the front now. Grab the bag that has the steering knuckles and front axles and get 4 more of those nylon nuts. The threaded bolts will be used for the front axles. They can simply be slid right through the center of each of the bearings, and the 2 nylon nuts can be threaded on the end. Pay close attention though to the orientation that you see here. The head of the bolt should be on the flat side of the knuckle just as shown. This step is optional, but in some situations you may find it necessary to trim the axles a bit shorter, as I've done for this build. This is just for cosmetic purposes, so you don't have too many threads sticking out beyond the wheel. I simply mounted the wheel in place, marked where I wanted to cut the axle, and then let the rotary tool do the rest. Now there'll be less threads showing on the finished car, which will look better. You may want to use some glue to hold the nylon nuts in place on each axle. Just be sure not to get any glue in the bearings. Also make sure you do not over tighten the nylon nuts, as that could prevent the axle from spinning smoothly. Both the front axles should be able to spin smoothly with minimal resistance. At this point, the steering knuckles are complete. This is what they should look like. We can go ahead and install the servo arm onto the steering servo. Locate the arm that looks just like the one that you see here and get the small screw that will be located in the same bag as the arm. Just the same as when building basically any other RC car, you can prevent having to go back and make adjustments later on by going ahead and connecting your ESC, battery, receiver, and servo and powering them on. With your transmitter's steering trim centered, this will ensure your steering servo is centered as well when you install the servo arm. I ended up doing this later on in the build, but it's best to do it at this stage if you can. Next, go ahead and locate the steering center link and this bag of hardware so we can connect the center link to the steering knuckles. You'll want to use some thread lock to prevent the nuts from coming loose, and pay close attention to the orientation that you see here to ensure yours is correct. We'll get these steering components secured to the chassis using these plastic parts, this bag of hardware containing 4 screws, and the remaining bearings. Install the steering components as shown, with bearings on the top and bottom of each knuckle. Then, using the 4 screws, secure the top half as shown. We'll connect the steering assembly to the servo using the parts contained in this bag. Slide on an O-ring, then this black plastic piece, then another O-ring, and finally thread on one of the nuts. Again, make sure to use thread lock. After that, use another nut and the small bolt to secure the other end of the plastic piece to the servo as shown. Here's how your completed steering assembly should look. The chassis is complete except for the wheels. This particular kit contains staggered wheels, so I'll be putting the wider wheels in the rear. I'll thread one nylon nut onto each side of the rear axle, followed by the wheel and one metal M2 nut. I'll make adjustments until the track width is correct for the body that I'll be using. I'll also measure the distance from the backside of each wheel to the chassis to ensure that the chassis is perfectly centered between each rear wheel. Once I'm satisfied with the position, I will use some glue to secure the inner nylon nuts in place. I don't want to glue the wheels or the outer metal nuts to the chassis, as that way I can remove the wheels if needed. If you have ordered a kit that does not include the wheels, you may need to modify the wheels that are included with the plastic model kit. I recommend drilling out the backside of each wheel with a 2mm bit. You may also need to cut this tube a little bit shorter. You can then simply thread or glue each wheel onto the axles. Using glue will of course make the wheels non-removable from the chassis, so test fit twice, glue once, so to speak. Finally, I'll secure the 2 front wheels into place, once again using the metal M2 nuts. Make sure that the front wheels can spin freely. The chassis is now complete. Next, we can install the electronics. This chassis kit includes an ESC and a JST plug that can be soldered to the motor. The remaining items that you'll need to get your car running are a transmitter, receiver, and a battery. For this project, I'm using a Radiolink RC6GS transmitter paired to a R4 FGM receiver. The battery is a 300 mAh 2S LiPo with a JST plug. The included ESC is only compatible with 2S LiPos, nothing with a higher voltage should be used. The small size of both this receiver and the battery will make them easier to fit onto this 1/24th scale chassis. Hooking up these components is no different than any other conventional RC car. Simply plug the steering servo and the ESC into the receiver as instructed by your receiver's manual. On the R4 FGM, slot 1 is for the steering and slot 2 is for the throttle, but this could be different depending on what receiver you are using. There are 2 JST plugs coming out of the ESC. The female plug is for the battery and the male one goes to the motor. To save a bit of space on this project and to keep things simple, I chose to just cut and solder the ESC's motor wires directly to the motor rather than using the included JST plug. Whether or not you decide to do this is completely up to you. This 68 Corvette body doesn't allow a ton of room for the electronics, and it doesn't look like I'll be able to have an interior, but I've got everything to fit and it's working. As you can see, I've used a few small zip ties to tidy up the wires a bit and to keep them out of the way of moving parts. Finally, we can install the body. The body is just cosmetic, so there isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to mount it to the chassis. As long as it's solidly attached and does not interfere with any moving parts, it'll work. This chassis kit includes 4 posts and some magnets that can be used to secure the body. I glued 3 posts to the chassis, 2 in the rear and 1 towards the front. I trimmed each post down low enough so that the body will be positioned as high as I want it when the magnets are placed on top. I then glued 1 magnet to the top of each post. I placed a small piece of paper in between the upper and lower magnets so they don't accidentally get glued together. I put some glue on the top of each magnet and then placed the body where I wanted it positioned. Once the glue dries, the magnetic body mounts are complete. Sometimes you may find it helpful to shim the magnets a little, as I did here, just to make the body sit a bit more level. I really like using these magnets as they hold the body in place, but it's very easy to remove the body when needed. Looking at the car, you may notice that the front wheels are tucked pretty far inside the wheel wells. I'd like for them to sit a little closer to the edge of the body. To do this, I simply installed an additional nylon nut to sit behind each front wheel to basically act as a spacer. Doing this though did mean that I needed to remove some material from the body around the front wheel arches to allow enough room for the wheels to steer left and right. With that complete though, the car is now ready to be painted, which I'll be showcasing in an upcoming video. The car is now fully functional at this stage, and I did a quick test drive to give you an idea of the kind of performance that you can expect from this chassis. It's got plenty of torque to break those back tires loose, but the overall top speed is not as fast as something that you'd find from a more expensive Mini Z chassis. If you're just looking for a simple platform to have some fun with and make your plastic model cars drivable, this is a great option, but it's not for someone who wants a competitive level race car or drift car. I'd certainly recommend driving with care, but from my experience, I can tell you that this chassis will handle some unintended abuse. I can get a pretty solid 20 to 30 minutes of runtime with this 300 mAh battery if I'm using a lot of throttle, but it's a good idea to check your battery voltage every 20 minutes or so to make sure that you're not draining your battery too much. These ESCs don't have a low voltage cutoff, so it's on you to make sure that you do not overdrain the battery, as it could potentially cause damage or reduce the lifespan of the battery. For any builders out there, I certainly hope that you find this video helpful. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. If you're interested in purchasing one of these chassis kits, you'll find the link below in the description. More chassis kit variations are planned, assuming this batch of kits is a successful seller. We received quite a bit of feedback for some of our prior kits, which has been very helpful in creating these new, slightly more basic kits that you see here, and we will continue to do the best we can to satisfy all of you builders interested in this unique niche of the RC hobby. Of course, some hobbyists are looking for something with a bit more detail than what this FP UC1 chassis offers. For them, I'd recommend checking out our Patreon page for a wide variety of tiny parts that can be 3D printed and used for a custom build like some of the projects that I've shown on this channel, or check out our FFR SC1 chassis kit, which features a more lifelike drivetrain and suspension layout. But of course, there's some people out there who don't have 3D printers and just want a relatively simple kit to do a very basic model to RC conversion with less complexity and less of a time and money investment. If that's you, I think you're really going to enjoy this kit, and certainly stay tuned for future releases. I can't wait to get the 68 Corvette painted, but that is going to be all for today's video. As always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.